Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Taiwan says it stays on high alert as Chinese naval forces pull back after massive military drills around the island. Authorities keep an emergency response centre active while continuing to monitor China's movements. Ukraine says a Russian attack on Odessa injures 4 people, including 3 children. Authorities say emergency services respond as damage is assessed. The United Arab Emirates says it is pulling its remaining forces out of Yemen after Saudi Arabia backs a call for their departure within 24 hours. The move follows a Saudi-led strike on Mukalla port targeting what Riyadh called a UAE-linked weapons shipment, marking a major escalation in the Gulf Rift. The US Justice Department says it still has 5.2 million pages of Epstein-related files to review and needs hundreds of lawyers to complete the work. Officials warn the process will push the final release far beyond the original congressional deadline. Thailand releases 18 Cambodian soldiers under a new ceasefire after weeks of deadly border clashes. Both sides say the truce eases tensions after fighting that killed over 100 people and displaced hundreds of thousands. Iran's prosecutor general says economic protests are legitimate but warns any move to create insecurity or damage public property will face a decisive response. He says authorities will act against what they view as externally driven efforts to destabilize the country. China says it will impose an additional 55% tariff on certain beef imports from countries including Brazil, Australia and the United States that exceed set quotas from January the 1st. Beijing says investigations found imports were damaging its domestic industry. Mali and Burkina Faso impose reciprocal travel restrictions on American nationals after the United States adds both countries to its no-entry list. The governments say the move matches measures taken by Washington under President Donald Trump's expanded travel ban. Those are the headlines this hour, and we move next to the Middle East. And the United Arab Emirates has announced it is pulling out its remaining forces from Yemen, deepening a sharp diplomatic crisis with Saudi Arabia. The move came after Riyadh backed a call for UAE forces to leave within 24 hours, following a Saudi-led airstrike on the southern Yemeni port of Mukalla. Saudi Arabia said the strike targeted a UAE-linked weapons shipment, an accusation Abu Dhabi has denied. The UAE said its mission was limited to counter-terrorism personnel and that it ended the deployment voluntarily after a review of recent developments. The United States has held talks with both sides as Gulf states called for dialogue. The escalation highlights growing rifts between two key Gulf allies whose diverging interests in Yemen and oil policy now threaten regional stability. Joining us now is Sol Sadka, a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sol, for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, we've seen this situation escalate in the past few days. How serious are today's events? Sol, can you hear me? Okay. Of course, this is an ongoing situation. Day by day is developing with Saudi Arabia now, the United Arab Emirates now pulling its remaining forces from Yemen, deepening already a sharp diplomatic crisis with Saudi Arabia. And this move came after Riyadh backed a call for UAE forces to leave within 24 hours. Following a Saudi-led airstrike in the southern Yemeni port of Mukalla. Saudi Arabia has said the strike targeted a UAE-linked weapons shipment, an accusation Abu Dhabi has denied. Saul Sadka joins us now. He is a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Saul, thank you very much for joining us. Glad to have you. Of course, this situation has been developing in Yemen over the past week or so. The United Arab Emirates have now announced that they are pulling their forces from Yemen after Saudi Arabia called for that. How significant of a development is this today?
It does appear that the UAE is backing down from its positions and has avoided a major conflict with Saudi Arabia that could have been a disaster for the entire Arabian Peninsula. The civil war that has been ongoing in Yemen for a decade at this point has been a disaster for Yemen, and there are various proxy forces within that territory, some supported, as we can see, by the Saudis and some by the UAE. And if those proxy forces ended up at loggerheads with actual UAE and Saudi troops facing each other, this could have been a catastrophe. So it looks like this has been avoided by the UAE backing down.
Indeed, and of course, what do we expect next for Yemen in particular? Of course, it's been in the midst of civil war for the past 14 years. Do we expect any developments outside of this situation?
It's very hard to say. It doesn't look good for Yemen at the moment. The Houthis, who hold approximately a third of the territory and half the population, in a terrible state of deprivation, are bedding in their control over their part of Yemen on the west. At the same time, they have lost a lot of their leadership to Israeli airstrikes, and they have lost a lot of their links to Iran as Iran proceeds towards its own apparent dissolution, although that has been predicted many times, although this time it does look worse than ever before. Yet Iran is no longer able to support the Houthis in the way that it was able to in the past, both because of their own financial difficulties and also because the links between Iran and the Houthis are increasingly suppressed via shipping and the ports and so on. So that element, it seems that the weakening of the Houthis, although they remain strong enough to control their population, has motivated the other parties to the civil war to step up their attacks, to step up the pressure in their direction. And what could be happening is that the UAE and the Saudis are all pushing in that direction and competing. And that has triggered the current standoff, which the UAE has backed down from. That could be what's happening, although it's entirely opaque at the moment. And what happens going forward? Well, the Houthis need to be weakened a lot further before Yemen could ever be reunified. The Houthis are essentially a completely obsessed jihadi group. They are not reasonable people that you can negotiate with. They have been attacking shipping at random over the past decade. And they are essentially pirates who live off the sword.
Right.
If they could be suppressed, perhaps there is a future for Yemen.
Yes, and Saul, finally, of course, Washington consistently relies on this Gulf alliance. What does this situation say for the future of the relations between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi?
Well, look, the situation is that the United States very much wants peace in the Middle East. The UAE is part of the Abraham Accords alongside Israel. The Trump administration very much wants to expand those Abraham Accords, and the key to expanding the Abraham Accords in the end will be the inclusion of Saudi Arabia. Why that hasn't happened yet is probably due to the old guard in Saudi Arabia, who are reluctant to, quote unquote, betray the Palestinians as they see it. The younger guard in Saudi Arabia is very much keen to join the Abraham Accords, and you have this standoff. And so there needs to be a generational transfer, probably, before that can actually happen in practice. What the United States certainly doesn't want is it doesn't want the actors within the Abraham Accords, which in a certain sense does secretly include Saudi Arabia, because it was Saudi Arabia that allowed, as the regional Arabian Peninsula hegemon, allowed the UAE and Bahrain to join the Abraham Accords with a prospect for himself joining. What it absolutely doesn't want is it doesn't want those people fighting among themselves. Yeah. So I would not be surprised if it was the Trump administration themselves who pressured the UAE into backing down in this case.
Saul Sadka, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time. We now move on over to Europe, and in a New Year's address, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that Europe faces multiple challenges in 2026, including Russian aggression, global economic pressures, and changing transatlantic relations. He has stressed the need to secure peace and prosperity by strengthening Europe's security and economic foundations. Let's listen in.
Ein schrecklicher Krieg tobt in Europa. Es ist ein Krieg, der auch unsere Freiheit und unsere Sicherheit unmittelbar bedroht. Unsere Wirtschaft steht unter dem Druck notwendiger Reformen, hoher Kosten und weltweiter Handelskonflikte. Zudem revolutionieren neue Technologien unsere Arbeitswelt und unser Zusammenleben. Aus diesem Befund leitet die Bundesregierung ihren grundsätzlichen Arbeitsauftrag ab: die Erneuerung der Fundamente unserer Freiheit, unserer Sicherheit und unseres Wohlstandes für die nächsten Jahre und vielleicht Jahrzehnte. Die Erneuerung dieser Fundamente wird nur möglich sein, wenn wir in Europa unseren Frieden in Freiheit sichern. Doch Russland führt seinen Angriffskrieg gegen die Ukraine mit unverminderter Härte fort.
Merz has also highlighted that Germany is increasingly targeted by cyber attacks, espionage, and acts of sabotage. He's warned that these threats are part of broader hybrid tactics, which he claims are aimed at threatening security and economic stability across Europe. At the same time, Merz has also pointed out Europe's dependence on imported raw materials, saying such dependencies are being used as political leverage in global politics. Joining us to discuss this is Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert. He joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much for joining us. Merz talks about Russian aggression here. Does Germany actually have the political will and power in Europe to match its rhetoric here with real military strength?
The short answer there is no, of course not at this point. The slightly longer and more nuanced answer is that the Europeans have finally woken up to the fact that the post-Cold War era, the unipolar moment, the end of history, it's over. And we're now in an era of great power competition. And Europe's typical subordinate relationship to the United States in the security realm is no longer adequate to European security needs. They can't rely on the United States. And so whether it's Macron or whether it's Merz or whether it's even Starmer in the UK and others, there's a movement afoot now to build up a military capacity to engage in strategic autonomy on the part of Europe, not abandoning the transatlantic relationship, but becoming less a subordinate partner and more an equal partner with the United States. And all of this, of course, with an eye to Russia in the Baltic, but also on the ground in Ukraine, and China, which is seeking to dominate all sorts of economic supply chains and whatnot in ways that threaten European autonomy. So I think he's speaking the mind of the chattering classes in Europe when he says that our European freedom and security is dependent upon us, the Europeans, taking more responsibility for our own military, diplomatic, and economic security.
Yes, indeed. Andrew, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And Finland's President Alexander Stubb has said that Finnish authorities have inspected a vessel suspected of damaging undersea cables in the Gulf of Finland. The move comes amid heightened alerts in Baltic Sea nations following multiple outages affecting power cables, telecom links, and gas pipelines since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Stubb said Finland is preparing for security challenges of various kinds and will respond as necessary. Andrew joins us once again. Andrew, of course, we have no confirmation about what has happened here, specifics, of course. However, it's very much hinted at there than what is the chief suspect of this. What is the methodology behind this? What does cutting undersea cables mean? What challenges does it bring to those affected?
To put it very starkly, undersea cables are the nervous system of the global economy, of various defense departments around the world, social media, I mean, we could not exist as a civilization without those undersea cables, whether they're pumping oil or information or whatever the case might be. And that opens up a front of vulnerability. And this is where the term of art is gray zone conflict. It's short of guns and bombs, but it's clearly aggression on the part of one party or one country against another. And that's what we see going on in the Baltic right now. We can't say for certain that the Russians are behind it, but any betting person in the intelligence community is pretty sure it's the Russians behind it. And what are they doing? They're trying to undermine and weaken what they see to be their adversaries, the Baltic states in particular, by not just severing these undersea cables, but by threatening that they could do much, much more. So the term of art, gray zone conflict, it's difficult to attribute responsibility or establish causality. Hybrid warfare, it's short of kinetic, no guns and bombs involved, just these kinds of attacks. It's the wave of the future. And retaliation is not the name of the game. Resilience and robustness, making sure that you can repair these insults and injuries as quickly as possible, and that will disincentivize countries like Russia from doing it in the first place.
Of course, as we've said, we don't know that Russia has done this. However, what would be their aims here? What would it achieve for them? How is this situation bringing them any avail?
Well, in the short term, it can undermine and weaken those countries, including their militaries, but also it can generate, let's say, political discomfort in the population. Oh my goodness, we are vulnerable to this kind of attack. I'm not going to be able to conduct my banking online today, or whatever the case might be. It also can involve things like social media manipulation in various American presidential elections. That's been the case. The Russians have put out stories and whatnot. But I think more profoundly, this is signaling to the Europeans, don't mess with us. Stop supporting Ukraine the way you have been supporting Ukraine, because we could ramp this up in ways that would seriously dislocate your economy and seriously inconvenience your populations to the point where there could be some political blowback in various elections around Europe. And I think that's what the Russians are doing, if indeed it is the Russians. Wink, wink, nod, nod. It probably is, and they are clearly signaling to the Europeans, back off, don't mess with us, and dial back your support for Ukraine, because it's not going to help you.
Indeed. And of course, Finland, a NATO member, does this kind of sabotage test the boundaries of Article 5, or is it not even close?
No, it's designed to do that as well. It's like the Russian aircraft earlier in the year, accidentally, quote unquote, entering into the airspace of Baltic nations. It's meant to say, okay, Article 5, well, look, we've just kind of violated, we've kind of attacked you, and the Americans aren't stepping up, the Canadians aren't stepping up, the Brits aren't stepping up. What does Article 5 mean? So it's a means of not just testing it, but corroding it slowly and almost imperceptibly, one small step at a time. I think that's the motivation here. And if I were a rational actor in Moscow thinking about how to advance my causes and my interests, this is the kind of warfare I'd be engaged in against the European NATO partners.
Do we expect any response here? Can we find out and confirm who is responsible? Legal actions, sanctions, cyber retaliation, increased military postures, possibly?
Yes, all of the above. Back in the Cold War, when the threat was nuclear attack, it was deterrence by punishment. If you attack us, we will respond and obliterate you. That doesn't really work in this gray zone kind of conflict. What works instead is punishment by denial, preventing them from being able to disrupt your undersea cables and whatnot. Now, there's a little bit of punishment that has to come in as well. So there's likely to be a lot of statements, maybe some legal actions. But here's the trick. It's very, very difficult to point with absolute certainty that's provable in a court of law and say, Russia was behind this, because they're designing these attacks deliberately to create an arm's length relationship between the perpetrators and the Kremlin. And so this right now is going to be limited to the realm of building resilience and robustness, signaling politically and diplomatically that we're not happy with these attacks, and building the conventional military as a way of signaling to Moscow, we will not be pushed around.
Andrew Latham, as always, it's a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. We now move on, and thousands gathered at Dhaka's Manik Mia Avenue earlier today to pay their last respects to Bangladesh's first female Prime Minister, Khaleda Zia. Her funeral prayer was held under tight security. Khaleda Zia passed away yesterday at the age of 80 after a prolonged illness. Her son and acting BNP chairman Tariq Rahman attended the prayer alongside Nobel Peace Laureate and interim government head Mohammed Yunus. Let's listen in to what Khaleda Zia's son had to say at the funeral.
আমি আজকে এখানে উপস্থিত সকল ভাইয়েরা এবং বোনেরা যারা উপস্থিত আছেন, মরহুমা বেগম খালেদা জিয়া জীবিত থাকাকালীন অবস্থায় যদি আপনাদের কারো কাছ থেকে কোনো ঋণ নিয়ে থাকেন, দয়া করে আমার সাথে যোগাযোগ করবেন। আমি সেটি পরিশোধের ব্যবস্থা করব ইনশাআল্লাহ। একই সাথে উনি জীবিত থাকাকালীন অবস্থায় ওনার কোনো ব্যবহারে, ওনার কোনো কথায় যদি কেউ আঘাত পেয়ে থাকেন, তাহলে মরহুমার পক্ষ থেকে আমি আপনাদের কাছে ক্ষমা প্রার্থী।
Now, despite being out of power for nearly 2 decades and spending years in jail or under house arrest, Khaleda Zia remained a powerful political figure. Her Bangladesh Nationalist Party continues to command strong public support and is widely seen as the front runner ahead of the parliamentary elections scheduled for next February. Now, as the world gets ready to bid farewell to 2025, New Zealand has emerged among the first countries to usher in the new year. Auckland is celebrating the arrival of 2026 with fireworks. The fireworks show started with a 10-second countdown projected on the base of Auckland's 320-metre-tall Sky Tower, followed by fireworks illuminating the night sky. The fireworks launched from 3 levels on Sky Tower, sending 3,500 fireworks shots around the tower and soaring 80 metres above it. Countries in the South Pacific are the first to welcome the new year in, with midnight in New Zealand arriving 18 hours before the ball drops in New York's Times Square. We move on now, and China has pushed back strongly against criticism from Japan, Australia and European countries over its recent military drills around Taiwan, calling the remarks irresponsible and hypocritical. The live fire exercises held over 2 days involve missile launches as well as deployments of fighter jets, naval ships and Coast Guard vessels around the island. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Juan said the drills were necessary and justified measures to safeguard China's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Let's take a listen in.
对台独分裂势力以武谋独、装聋作哑，对外部势力干涉中国内政视而不见，却对中方捍卫国家主权和领土完整的必要正义行动说三道四、颠倒黑白、混淆是非，十分虚伪。中方对此坚决反对，并已提出严正交涉。
As AI and chip makers power the city's equity markets come back and set the tone for 2026, Chinese AI startup Minimax Group has spearheaded 6 Hong Kong listings worth $2.15 billion. As per LSEG data, Hong Kong has raised $36.5 billion from 114 listings in 2025 for its strongest year since 2021 and more than triple the roughly $11.3 billion budget raised in 2024. Minimax seeks to raise up to $4.19 billion from 25.4 million shares priced in a range of $151 to $165 each, ahead of a January 9th debut. Semiconductor specialists OmniVision Integrated Circuits and Gigadevice Semiconductors have also started book building for their IPOS, aiming to raise around about $600 million each. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.